Hello, welcome to AIM 2020 Mechatronics for Infectious Disease special session. I'm Axel Krieger, Assistant Professor at the Johns Hopkins University. And I'll be presenting two of our current projects for robotic solutions for screening and for treatment. Okay, let's get started. Our first project is for robotic solutions for safer COVID-19 screening. So why is that important? Mass testing is part of the essential solution to combating the spread of COVID-19. Therefore, testing solutions need to support high throughput COVID-19 screening. Also need to eliminate the need for personal protective equipment for the screening and testing, and reduce the risk of exposure for medical staff during testing. So imagine right now we are close to 500,000 screenings per day. So if you use one PPE per test, that would require nearly 500,000 PPEs per day. And so reducing that is really important. We worked on two ideas here. Number one is protected provider-administered testing. As you will see in the next few slides, we didn't implement a robotic solution for that. We wanted to do something fast and immediate to help our clinical partners right away. And then we developed some concepts for patient self-administered automated testing as well. So here's a phone booth that we developed for provider-administered testing. My students, Zhao Wei and Lydia, will show the booth in action. To operate it, you first turn on the AC unit, which blows either cool or normal air into the testing booth and creates a positive pressure atmosphere inside the testing booth. This is HEPA filtered to protect the providers, and then as a provider you can work inside the booth protected without any PPE. The concept was developed actually in South Korea in these phone booth stalls. The idea is that these testing booths can be deployed in cities, for example, Baltimore City, and brought to different areas, and people tested that might not have a car and the means to get to drive-through stations, and you can test without risking infection for the providers. We have a little foot pedal there with a traffic light, so a green light indicates that it's ready for testing, and you can access the patient, talk to the patients via intercom system, and then swab the patient with these extended shoulder length gloves. And yeah, it works really well, and we were able to build these prototypes in a couple of weeks, get it ready for alpha testing in our facility. The providers really liked it. We tested the booth with dry ice just to make sure that it's really safe and secure, that no vapor gets into the booth as a proxy for maybe an aerosol going into the booth with a cough of a patient from the outside. So tested for any kind of leaks, but there's enough positive pressure to prevent any of the vapor going inside with the dry ice, and so we believe it's quite safe for the provider. In the latest iteration, we also measure the amount of positive pressure inside the booth. So with two pressure sensors, one inside, one outside, measure the differential pressure, and then have an indicator light that shows when and if the booth is actually safe for usage. The booth needs to be disinfected between patients. So there's one person on the outside that can maintain social distancing from patients, and then cleaning the booth, wiping the booth down between patients, especially the gloves. We successfully deployed the system in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins Bayview with 10 patients were tested with the booth, and afterwards we looked for traces of the virus inside the booth and didn't find any, so that was good news. Highly positive feedback from our providers, and now we're building additional prototypes for the Baltimore Health Department, Baltimore City Health Department, and for Johns Hopkins. Now, we also developed a couple concepts that are more robotic, a robotic solution for screening and testing. Here we believe that the self-administered drive-through testing is very attractive, could be really automated completely, much easier than provider-administered. Self-administered from home, of course, is an option, but it's often good that a provider can observe the self-administered test and deliver the testing kit and then receive the testing kit right after for analysis. So therefore, we believe that's really a good option for future mass testing. And here we developed concepts how we can protect the providers, deliver the kit to the car, to the passengers, observe the passengers during the self-administered test with cameras, and then receive the testing kits. We developed two concepts. One is the conveyor belt concept that you see here. So you have conveyor belt that brings the kit to the car window. Protective sheet moves with the conveyor belt to avoid any contamination of the actual belt, reduce it. Then the belt could also be cleaned with steam or light-based decontaminant. A provider would place the testing kits on top of a protective sheet at location A, so at social distancing from the car. A patient picks up the kit at location B, collects the samples under provider's monitoring, and replaces the kit on a protective sheet. The samples and protective sheets are dropped off in a collecting bin at collection C. Our second concept is a pulley concept. Here we replace the conveyor belt with an actual pulley that further reduces the risk of contamination of the actual belt. So a pulley would go in social distancing, like 6 feet above the car, and then have a little gripper mechanism that bring the testing kit to the passengers in the car. Then also observed with the cameras. And you also have the 3 locations here where you drop off a kit. The kit is delivered to the car and then collected at the end. Patients picks up the testing kit from the locked bag, would pull out the actual testing tube, do the self-swab, and replaces the samples into the bag attached to the rope, and then places the kit back onto the rope. Okay, let's get to our second project. That is robotic solutions for COVID-19 treatments. Particularly here, we want to discuss tele-manipulated robotic solution for ICU care. What you see here in this picture is an ICU bay with a ventilator right next to the patient. Now imagine ICU personnel wanting to change small settings on the ventilator, let's say increase the oxygen by 5%, have to go into the ICU bay to make this small setting change. Therefore, don and doff PPE going in and then out, and getting exposed for potential risk of infection. So a long-term solution, of course, would be to put these ventilators on a network, so you can make the adjustments of the settings online remotely, but that's not the case possible for current ventilators and other ICU equipment. So our idea is that we would use robots attached to current ICU equipment to enable them to be remotely operated and controlled, to save PPE and to reduce risk of infections. Here on the right is a picture of the ServoU ventilator. That's the most prominent ventilator at Johns Hopkins. It has a touchscreen interface. So our prototype robot that we developed is particularly developed for this ServoU ventilator. So our proposed telerobotic solution for the ICU consists of a robot that attaches to the touch interface and then can enable remote operation without exposing the ventilator directly to the network. Allows for substantial savings in PPE and reduction in staff exposure to COVID. So you have a little touch screen on the outside of the ICU with the ventilator settings with a camera, so directly from the ventilator in real time. Then your touchscreen interface inputs will be sent over the network to the robot inside the ICU, which would push a button to operate the equipment. So pressing button on the outside would cause the robot to push on the inside and result in the desired change in the setting. So here's the CAD drawing of the Cartesian robot for ventilators. So it's a 2-axis Cartesian robot that mounts directly onto the ventilator screen. The axes are moved with timing belts and stepper motors. And then the third degree of freedom is a spring-loaded cam-driven end effector, allows for the touch interactions. Safety is ensured by monitoring the current spikes on the stepper motors to detect eventual collisions with a finger or some other equipment. For manufacturing, we optimized the design to be very cost effective and lightweight. All parts were bought from stock materials or printed with FDM 3D printer. So very lightweight and pretty fast design iterations in our prototypes. Cameras mounted to the side of the screen. This side-mounted camera causes, of course, warping of the image because different parts of the image are further away than others. And now we employed a computer vision algorithm to dewarp the image for the user interface. So the user interface simulated is visible here. You can push on a button on the camera image. The robot moves to that position. Green circle shows the camera measurement of the robot position, and then visual servoing closed loop control would get you the high accuracy needed to make very fine adjustments on the touch screen. We also implemented LED inside the finger so that the point that is being touched with the robot is actually visible on the screen. We constructed 2 prototypes with all the mechanical functionality and the small Raspberry Pi cameras. We integrated these Raspberry Pi's cameras and integrated them with network communication. That was written in ROS, Robot Operating System, with nodes for the robotic device and the remote operator. Currently, we are performing testing of the repeatability and the precision of the positioning of the finger interaction. And our next step would be then testing of ease of use. On the left, you see a video of the robot in action. Interacting with a touchscreen, with a simulated touchscreen here, with not active setting, but just a passive screen. On the right side, you see an interface with the dewarping, the warped and the dewarped image, and then how the closed loop visual sovereign control would work in the final prototype. So we have the mechanical prototype ready. We have the visual sovereign and control software ready. And now we are currently integrating the two together and performing the final testing. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention and thank everybody who helped on these projects, in particular my team in the Immerse lab at Hopkins. Misha Krinov did a lot of the work on the actual Cartesian robot design for the ICU robots. Lydia and Jawei did the work on the testing booth. And then the collaborators from LCSR at Hopkins and our clinical partners, Dr. Farley, Dr. Greenbaum, and Kevin Arum from University of Maryland. With that, I'd like to thank for your attention, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Happy to interact by email. Thank you.